If I'm homesick, will you take?
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Seafood from Scotland's Fishmonger's Masterclass. Unfortunately, this is going to be the last one of our series. This week, we're going to be focusing on Flatfish, and we're going to have the amazing CJ Jackson. Incredible work she's been doing over the last 3 episodes, and this week she's going to be focusing on Flatfish. And, you know, the one thing that I've learned a lot over the last 3 weeks is that you, as a chef, when you're working in this business, you think you know quite a lot. And the one thing that you do, you learn every day. And I'm delighted that I've managed to spend some good time with CJ over the last few weeks. And I'm really excited about this one. Lastly, for the Q&A, we'd like to have a Q&A at the end of the session. So if it is possible, if you look down on your screen, there's at the bottom of the screen, there's a function for the Q&A. So if you want to load up some questions for the end, we're going to be more than happy to answer them all. And over to you, CJ.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I'm a bit sad, actually. It's the last one.
I know, me too. I've absolutely loved doing this. And I think it's been the real highlight of my lockdown time. So having said that, I've made 2 trips to Billingsgates this week to pick up the product, which says a lot about seafood. You know, because it's a wild caught product, if they haven't landed it, you just have to go with something else. But I was struggling to get the which is this one here, and it came in this morning rather than yesterday. So I had to go up to the market twice. But it's really important to remember that it's wild, and therefore, you know, if they catch it, fantastic. If it's in season, fantastic, but it doesn't always work like that. Anyway, it's good to see you. Who are those 2 lovely girls behind your shoulder? Are they your children?
No, they're 2 girls that used to work with me. I'm actually sitting on table 10 in the restaurant because there's not many people sitting in my restaurant at the moment. So I thought I would.
Oh, no, okay.
We've got one in for lunch.
Okay, well, very nice to see everybody. Hazel, thank you very much. It's very nice to hear that you've enjoyed the time that Roy and I have spent together. I would really love or hope that we could continue doing this in some way in the future. And certainly I'm going to head up to Scotland. Every time I think about it, when I'm sitting down in rural Kent, I think how fantastic it would be to head back up there and see my family and see the market for myself. So Peterhead, I know, is on the agenda. What's happening with that? The Peterhead visit?
Well, we're still waiting. Obviously, we're going to have to wait until the lockdown and when we're allowed to go back into the marketplace. But we're still taking Instagram shots, and we're still waiting to find out who's going to be the eventual winner. So we've got a little bit of time to go on that. It's not finished yet.
Well, it's such a fantastic thing, and it always inspired me. And I think at the end of this session today, we're hoping that Jess Sparks, who is the guru as far as Peterhead's concerned and works for Seafish, he's going to join us, I think, at the Q&A at the end, I believe. Well, let's hope so. Jess, I hope you're online and seeing what we've got. Anyway, Flatfish, I'm really excited about this particular one. I love working with a lot of these species. To be fair, though, it's just coming back into season for some of the fish because they all go through sort of springtime into early summer. They're going to go, oh, hello, morning, all, I can hear, but no vision. Oh, right, okay, Jess, well, you can't see what I'm doing, but you hope you can hear me. So it's a lot to talk about seasonality and also about quality aspects of the flatfish as well. And I've got a nice selection on the board. The first thing I want to show, though, which is too big to go on here, is this chap. Absolutely fantastic brill. I ordered this yesterday. I wanted it, and in fact, it's one of my really favourite fish. And it's massive. And normally, I would normally expect a slightly smaller fish than this. And I'm putting it on the headwise, so head on, so you can see. And from where you're sitting, everybody, you can see the eyes are to the left and the mouth of this fish is to the right. And that's important, not necessarily for a chef's perspective, but I do a lot of work with environmental health officers. And one of the things they're looking for all the time is how to ID fish. Now that brill is really closely related to this one here. Also left-sided, so from where you're sitting, eyes to the left, mouth to the right. This is a turbot. And for many years, turbot was considered to be, along with halibut, I suppose, one of the king fish, or king of the fish. Brill, they're closely related. They come from a group of fish called the Bothidae group. And so they're very closely related, both left-handed. And basically, they're produced wonderful, firm, white textured flesh. Great for all sorts of cooking. Roy, out of your preference, do you have any particular preference, turbot or brill? What do you think?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I do like both, but I'd probably go with turbot actually, because we're doing quite a lot of whole turbot cooking at the moment. Well, we're doing a whole lot of turbot cooking, just like the whole fish. Something that, you know, that's been quite trendy, you know, like Brat down in London, they were starting to do the whole sort of bass style. I know Mitch Tong does it, you know,
Yeah.
I've seen,
he does fish works. I had a whole brill once and it was sensational. And it would be great to get people thinking and embracing dealing with skin and bone again, actually. Because as we know, certainly cooking, and I deal with a lot of food lovers, they're very underconfident about cooking. And cooking on the bone, you're going to retain the moisture better, and also you're going to get the flavour.
well, I had one turbot for last Sunday, and you know, we're doing this Ondine at home thing, and we just sold out, so I had to use my bloody turbot. So I was a bit disappointed. So hopefully I'll get one this weekend. Well,
this one's fabulous quality. It's got lovely pink gills. I'm just going to see if you can turn around and see that. It arrived into Billingsgates yesterday morning at about 2 o'clock. So I've had it in my possession, packed on ice overnight, and very happy with the quality. You identify turbot not only by the left-sided, it's called sinistral. 100 years ago, if you were left-handed, you'd be called sinister. So the sinistral eyes there. But one of the key things about this fish is it's got sharp barbs over the skin. So if you run your fingers over the skin, you will see there's little sharp barbs coming through. And probably when you cook it and the skin shrinks away from those barbs, they stick out of the skin slightly. Makes it look like the Gruffalo. Sorry, I've got kids. But that's where you get that sort of idea from. Turbot is so popular, they also farm it. But you'd identify this as being not sort of a wild fish by the white, slightly pearlescent belly. This fish has been landed. It's a 1 to 2 kilo fish. It's quite small. When I was up at Peterhead, I saw big boxes, 50 kilos of them, but actually only 3 or 4 fish in the box because they were so big. When they land this fish, I'm just going to move it slightly so you can see where my thumb is. But when they land these fish, in order to get rid of some of the blood, and so it's not sitting any blood, they actually make a little nick at the tail and jet a bit of water through there to rinse it out, so it keeps the flesh nice and white. Now the preparation of that, if I was doing this at home, yeah, great on the bone, it makes so much difference, it's so much more flavour involved, but I probably would go through a process of quarter cutting this by running a knife down the middle and then lifting off, fillet on one side and a fillet on that side, turn it over and do the same. So you end up with 4 fillets, hence a quarter cross cut, which I'm talking about. But absolutely beautiful fish. I'm not going to do anything with that today, but an absolute stunner. I'm going to put that aside. Some of the more familiar and smaller flatfish, which also great to cook whole. This is probably the one most iconic, is plaice. This plaice, orange spots on the skin. Plaice is, as I said, very iconic. It's the darling of the fish and chip shops. But dabs and flounders particularly, we get a lot of them around the south coast here. You probably get them in Scotland, and they can imitate plaice. So sometimes when you pick them up, they have little orange spots as well. But flounders and dabs, when you run the skin, they actually feel quite rough. This is completely smooth. It has a distinctive mark across, or little bumps across the head, and it's got a very distinctive wrist at the tail. So if I pick the tail up, just going to point it round, you can see that the tail's very splayed, and you've got this area where you can easily pick the fish up. Now, plaice has just come back into season over the last month. It goes through a spawning process, and plaice produces so much roe that when it spawns, the flesh loses condition. The expression is the fish gets a bit skinny. And if you went to a fishmonger, say January, February time, and asked for plaice, they very often say, oh, it's a bit on the skinny side. With this fish, when it's a lot of these flatfish, but particularly with this, when it is spawning and growing that roe, everything it eats goes into the development of the roe, and the fish loses weight. Once it's shot its roe, the expression of the fish will be spent, and spent basically, it's lost its roe, and the flesh will be a little bit watery. And they come into the market still. They're still absolutely beautiful, in a state of most fabulous rigor mortis. But if you cook it, it goes out a lot of liquid, and there's not a huge amount of flavour. So, and they're just coming back now. And where I'm running my fingers is where the roe sack would have been. It's beginning to fill back over. This fish could get a little bit further over. So it's, when you're thinking about seasonality, fish, but you're going to get best really from May through to November, beginning of December. And you can't absolutely say exact months because the fish doesn't know it's the 1st of December, but it just depends on the state of the roe. So really, really lovely fish. And again, a fishmonger, if they cut this for you, would offer to take off what they call a cross-cut fillet, which I'm going to do with my lemon sole in a minute. So you take the whole top off, so you get one fillet from the top, turn the fish over, and a second fillet from the underside. Chefs, I believe, well, certainly when I was working in food, I would use the cross-cut method, where you take fillet off from either, sort of 2 fillets from either side. I'll pop that back in my box. Okay, so the next 3 is one of the most expensive of all the flatfish, and like turbot, it's also farmed now. It's a common sole. We call it a Dover sole, purely because back in the 1900s there were a lot of landings in Dover, and there were quick access to Billingsgate. But it is a common sole. It has this little black mark along the pectoral fin, and this skin, if you rub your finger from tail up to the head, it actually feels like a cat's tongue. It's quite rough, smooth, lovely from head to tail. From tail to head, it's a little bit rough. Now, I'm sure people, please don't be offended by this, but at Billingsgate, they call it mother-in-law's tongue. And I can say that because I have my moments with my mother-in-law. But it has that. Was that offensive? I hope that's not offended anybody. But that's typical Billingsgate talk, because it's smooth one way and rough the other. So if you have a lovely mother-in-law, you're fine. Okay, somebody's asking about the cost of these. Certainly, and with the lemon sole. Now, we've got the Dover here. Dover's this week. Again, you can see a bit of roe beginning to form here. And they can be very expensive when they're in superb condition and no roe. I have seen them over 35, 40 pounds at the market, which is wholesale. So they can be very expensive. And it's a fish that, if you're paying a lot of money for it, probably the last thing you want to do is actually fillet it, because you end up with 4 very small fillets. So I'm going to look at this today in comparison to the witch, which is also known as torbay sole or witch sole, which is here, which is about 1/4 of the price. And I think really compares with flavour in sort of, thank you, Malcolm. That really helps me. We all have mother-in-laws with a cat's tongue. Right, okay, moving swiftly on. Somebody just asking me about the price for lemons. Now, lemon sole and brill are probably my 2 favourites. But they can really vary in price. It'll depend completely on landings. Lemon sole, if you look where my finger is now, just tilting it, you've got a little bit of yellow piping around by the gills, and that's how you'd identify a lemon sole. They have this mottled skin. All of these flatfish and demersal fish, they swim on the seabed. They use their fins to flick over gravel and sand, and therefore they're well camouflaged. But that little bit of yellow piping is very descriptive of, as I say, that little bit of yellow piping. If you hold the fish up, it doesn't look dissimilar to a lemon in shape, actually, as well. And again, you get lovely fillets off that. Now, looking at this, it's got a little bit of roe here, just that little paddy bit there, but I'm going to fillet that in a moment and show you how a fishmonger would normally take the top fillet off from that. So yes, it's to do with landing and popularity. And recently, when Place was out, they were not catching a lot of fish. This was coming in, it's always popular, and if the landings are not good, the price goes right up. It's the same with everything. And at Christmas, we were looking at extraordinary prices with fish coming into the market and going up and up. But you know, it's just the way it is. But beautiful fish. Let's turn him over and have a look. Now with lemon sole, one of the deciding or defining factors with this fish is that all of these fish are generally going to have a very thick natural slime. And the slime on all of these, with the exception of lemon sole and probably turbot, is it's normally completely clear. It becomes a bit sticky as the fish ages, but lemon sole has quite a creamy coloured slime, quite sticky slime, which wouldn't put me off. I'm smell everything I'm working with. Smells good, that makes me go back to my my Dover. And I'm going to hold that up. You can see that Dover sole can actually kiss its tail. If I fold the two over, I'll do it down here as well. It can kiss its tail. Most of these fish, we don't want that that soft, but Dover sole, I think, is a fish that really holds well. If you pack it on ice, the flavour develops over a period of time. And if you were to get a Dover sole that's so fresh, it's still rigid, you will find it's really difficult to get the skin off because it's normally cooked, skinned. You can leave the skin on, but traditionally it will be skinned. I don't know what you would do, Roy, so I'm talking a lot now, but I know that various restaurants I've been to, they leave the skin on, protect it, and then take it off when it's cooked. But sole cold bear, when you skin it and snip out the bone and deep fry it, you'd have to get rid of that skin, and it's very difficult to skin if the fish is fresh. So let me give you get a word in edgeways here. So out of these three, have you got any particular preference?
Like I would normally work with lemon sole. Dover sole generally is quite expensive for what it is. I think like the landings down south on Dover sole obviously are a lot bigger. So we would just, like, say with a Dover sole, we'd just take off the scales and score it and then simply grill it with some sea salt and lime.
Okay. So you'd scale it, but you wouldn't. You'd leave the skin on.
Keep the skin on. Do you know what? I kind of love having whole fish. I think we've done a lot of sharing dishes. Before we were doing a lot of sharing fish dishes at the table, and
yeah.
Why not? You know, like you have a Sunday roast. Why not have a fish Sunday roast? You know, it's just it's a great way to cook, and I think you get the fish on point. Then, you know, I think there's even less room for mistake because it's, you know, it's a whole fish and the bones keeping the moistness in the fish. So I think it's a great way to cook, and it's quite a great way to eat together. You know, it's a great sharing dish.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When they're skinning this, of course, as soon as you take the skin off, you need to add something to prevent it drying out. So I've got a bit of a domestic scaler here, but running that up from tail to head, you can see how many scales actually begin to lift off. And it's so scaling it, and then a little bit of salt, a little bit of oil on that, you say. Now, you had a tip yesterday we were talking about where you put a little bit of vinegar over, sherry vinegar, to crispen the skin. That was a fantastic tip. Yeah,
that's across in Bass. What they do is just get some like cherry vinegar in a bottle spray, and when they put it in the fish sort of clips, and pop it onto the grill, and then when they turn it over, they spray it with the vinegar on both sides, and it just helps crispen up the skin.
Yeah,
so
lovely.
In the barbecue.
Lovely. Do you know, you never stop learning, and that was one of the key learnings for me yesterday. I'm always interested to hear how other people think and work with fish. Now, I'm just going to put the Dover sole to one side, and what I'm going to do is look at this particular fish. Now, which, not hugely popular, I can't quite work out where it gets its name from, although I do think the tail resembles a broomstick. I don't know where that gets from that. And for many years, the merchants couldn't sell it very well. Somebody then thought, oh, let's change the name. So the name evolved into Torbay sole. And as soon as you add the word sole, Dover sole, lemon sole, it flew out. Everybody wanted it. So it's gained popularity. I think, like the Dover sole, it really benefits being cooked on the bone. And if you look around the edge here, where my fingers are, you've got the edge frill, but you've also got quite a fine line of bones and not a lot of flesh. You've just got the main section of flesh here and here. So the actual main fillet is not massive. So keeping it on the bone is a really good option. So I'm going to crack on and prepare this. For skinning, I think first of all, I'm actually going to trim off the fins. Always remember, when you're cutting fins, go from tail to head. It makes it much easier to remove them. Those could go into a stock pot if you want to. Flip the fish over, rather than trying to cut round that way. Flip the fish over and snip the other side. You could go in a little bit deeper here, if you wanted to. So I'm just cutting through the top. And then I'm going to look at preparing this just to cook whole. I am going to remove the head. And for that, I'm going to put my thumb, just turn this so you can actually see what I'm doing. I'm putting my thumb on the nose of the fish and my finger in where the fish is actually being gutted. Most of these fish are gutted on landing. And to cut this, again, I'm just turning so you can see. I'm going to use the heel of the knife just to open up the back. Be careful with your fingers here, just to open up the back where it's been gutted. Let the fish drop onto the board. And then I'm going to move the fish round and then cut close into the head, so you're getting maximum yield, minimum waste. So what I've done is just marked into the back of the head there. To cut through, always use the heel of your knife. That's where you've got the most amount of control. So put your heel of your knife on the bone, turn it again so you can see, and I'm going to force that through, and that just cuts it straight through without any slippage. You could use these for stock, but it's quite fiddly getting rid of the gills. Very often they're a bit muddy because it's a demersal fish swimming on the seabed, but you can use it. That's ready for the next stage on. So head off, trimmed fins. Now, the next thing then is the bloodline. The bloodline of this fish, I'm just turning so you can see, it's just where my index finger is there. It's actually the kidney function of the fish, and you need to remove it. If you leave it in there, it will, like mackerel, affect the flavour of the fish around the area. So I'm going to put the tip of my knife in there, and using the back of the knife, just scrape that away. So I'm just trying to tip it so you can see what I'm doing, and just removing that or releasing it. Don't wash fish too much. When it comes out of the water, it needs washing before you cook it. But I've seen people wring fish under the tap like it's old cloth. And of course, it absorbs a lot of moisture. So it's really important that I wouldn't put too much water in here, certainly at this stage, unless you're really struggling to get rid of that. Now, there's a famous story. I went into a very famous fish restaurant. I couldn't possibly tell you which one it was. I sat down with my husband, and I love lemon sole whole. Somebody's just pointed out that they like cooking lemon sole whole, and I ordered it off the menu, and it turned up. And as it turned up, I went, oh, look, they've left the bloodline in. And my husband said, do not make a fuss. And I think he thought I was about to complain, but the bloodline was in there, and I was just an observation. But it is important to remove it because it can affect the flavour of the fish. Right, next thing then, I want to think about the skin. Now, with a Dover sole, one of the most traditional ways of skinning this is from the tail end. Slip the tip of the knife in. You don't want to cut it. You just, in fact, I'll just start that off. I think we've got time to do that. I'm going to slip the tip of the knife in, lying it slightly flat, or just up and down the end of the tail, just to get the tip. Are you able to hear me now?
Gosh, I thought we'd lost you.
No, I'm here. My computer has had a moment. Just what I don't need. I'm going to let that. It's good. It says it needs to restart for some reason. The delights of technical stuff. I'm going to tip this down so I can just show you. Is it possible for you to see that now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Well, I'll carry on with that, and I'll come back to the screen in a moment. I'll move it back up and down. So for the skinning of this, I'm sorry about that, everybody. The delights of technical things. Knife up and down. Sorry, I'm just mark that there. Scrape away the tail. And as you go in with a knife, it's like a little piece of plaster. You want to get the tip of the knife onto that little piece of tail. It's like if you know that you have a piece of plaster, it starts coming loose. That's all you want to do. You don't want to use a knife for anything else. I'm then going to use my cloth to hold on to that skin and then pull the skin away and use my fingers to run up the side of the fish to release it.
So
And then, can you still see that? Is that okay?
are you trying to remove your mother-in-law's tongue at this point?
I am. I am indeed. So I'm just going to pull that away. But it's really important when you're skinning this that you don't cut, because if you make a cut into the flesh, when you pull it, it's just the tip of the knife to start the session. And then I'm going to just run my thumb all the way up the edge. And when you come to do this and remove the skin, you have to do it so carefully. Use your thumb to prevent the fish from tearing. It's really easy just to yank it, and then you take off what is known as the silver skin and the shine on the fillet here. Is that back yet? No, it's not. So I'm going to just use my thumb in there, just so that it doesn't tear too much. And can you see the lovely silver skin and shine on the fillet? You then ease it down. You need 2 cloths actually for this. As it goes down towards the head, and then you pull that away. That skin into stock, but you can see that silver skin and shine, a little bit around the head there, and then cut the head off and trim off your fins. Now that is a traditional way of skinning a Dover sole. The method I'm going to use now for the witch is one of my preferred methods. Again, Roy, can you see this all right?
Yeah, it's good actually. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do is just put the tip of my knife in at the top end now. And imagine, again, you want that skin to be like a little piece of plaster. So it just goes in a little way, and then you bend the knife away just to open it up at the corner. When that comes to the corner, all I want to do now is don't use the knife anymore. I'm going to use my cloth. In fact, I'll go this way first. If you can't see, please say. And then, I love the noise of this. It sounds like ripping sellotape. I'm going to just remove and open up the skin down towards the tail here. And then once it's released, you want to hold on to the skin and pull it, again, using your thumb to prevent the flesh from tearing. I'm not using a nail there, I'm just using the side of my thumb. And pull the skin right the way across to release it. This is where it's likely to tear because it's putting it there, and then opening. And again, you need quite a bit of grip. And it is possible to do this on a lemon sole and on a Dover sole. It's quite holding tightly. The fish is very fresh. The fresher it is, the harder it is to put it away. So gently pulling. You can see the area here where you've got your roe sack, and then just pull straight down towards the tail. And then you've got your second skin removed. So both of those methods work. It works particularly well with, do the same thing with plaice. You can do the same thing with lemon sole. I would say lemon sole generally was the hardest one to skin in that way. Okay, I'm sorry you can't see my face, but at least you can see my fish. So what I'm going to do next is, you could cook this, but Roy, have you ever heard of a thing called a Corbière fillet?
Yeah.
Or a Corbière pocket?
Yes, I have. Yeah, so it's quite scoffy. It's quite a long time ago since I've done that.
What we do with these fish is we just make an incision down the middle of the fish. So that's where your lateral line was. And when you're making that cut, keep the knife flat, cut all the way down, not too much sawing if you can help it, just to open up to the bone. And I can now feel the bone running in there. I'm going to get the tip of the knife just on the bone there and run the knife down in one action. Whoops, all the way down like that. So get the knife in and one long action. Whenever you're working with fish, it's really important that you use that long stroking action rather than short cutting, because if you use a short action, you'll end up feathering the fillet. Turn the fillet over the other side, get the tip of the knife on the bone again. You can hear it, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's pinging over the bone. And then a long sweep, keeping the knife flat on the bone, just to peel the bone back. Now you can see roe in there, and some people don't like it. You can take it out at this stage if you want to. I'm going to just cut my tail off. I'm going to use a cloth just to wipe out that black membrane, which doesn't look terribly attractive. I personally like the roe, but if you've got people that don't like it, you can put it away. So you fold your fillets back, and then you can put a stuffing in the middle. So that is just our Corbière pocket. Okay, right, still see me, still with me? My other computer's decided to die a death, but is that all right, as long as you can actually see the board?
I can see your board.
Okay, next thing then. It might come back, it's just, hold on, it's still thinking what it's going to do. Oh, it's decided to reconfigure, very helpful. Okay, so I'm going to look at now at the actual cross-cut filleting of the lemon sole. And for that, again, for this, just if you're a fishmonger, you wouldn't normally bother taking the head off. But I want to take the head off just to be able to identify where, I put the knife through there, cut through. Same thing as before, as close to the head as possible. But I also, by doing this, I just wanted to identify where you actually need to put that knife. So head off. And if you look at the fish here, again, you've got a bit of roe in there. But where my finger is, and are you able to see that? It's probably quite good, actually. I think the slight angle. You can see the top of the bone there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to insert the knife. And I'm going to just try and work so you can actually see what I'm doing. But I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to sit it on top of the bone, push that in along the bone, and with the knife at a slight angle, I can actually feel it's practically like sewing, and you can't see what you're doing. So I push the knife in about 2 centimeters into along the bone under the fillet, and then I'm going to just open that out to the edge. And by opening it out, you can then see that you've gone right close to the edge and just released that. I'm going to put the knife in again. The quicker the action and the less the cut, the better. I'm going to open that out. You must have a cloth to help you do this. Opening it out to the edge. And again, knife in and open out to the edge. So that way, you've taken it all right to the edge. You haven't feathered the fillet. And as soon as you got down to the tail, I'm going to put my knife in, bend it, and then a long sweeping action to take the knife right up to the backbone. So that's one side released. And then for the second side, I'm going to make a little incision at the tail there. Tiny bit of bone there, I can trim it a bit later. I'm going to get get a cleaner cloth. I'm going to get my tip of my knife over the backbone now. In the same way when I was lifting the bone off or lifting the fillet off the witch, tip of the knife in there, and then drag that knife down. I talk a lot about holding up my finger on the back of the knife there. I tend to do that. I don't have very big hands. And what that does, it helps me control the knife a bit better. So cutting down, and then as soon as you've taken it over the backbone, I'm turning the fish round now. Again, I'm hoping you can see this. And I'm going to use a sweeping action, running the knife against the bone.
Lemon sole quite a high ridge on it, hasn't it? So
it has. The hardest one, actually, there's a tiny little bit of bone here. Place has got rib bones here, which are quite difficult to remove. So, and you then need to get the tip, it's difficult to get your knife over the top of that. So here you have, I've released that. So that now is your cross-cut fillet. And that's normally how a fishmonger would normally do it. And then for chefing, again, straight down the middle of the fish, straight down there, and then lift your fillet off. So you get cross-cut fillets. And I think it really depends on who you're cutting for and what desired result you'd like. But that would be to take those fillets off like so.
So to find out how other people are doing it in the industry, you know, like different restaurants, and also at colleges. How are the colleges approaching fish like this? Are they taking it over the double fillet? Are they going down singular? Do they do both? It'd be quite interesting to see how our industry is getting taught, and also how our different restaurants approach it.
What would you normally use?
I go double fillet. I go
Okay.
over. I try to keep everything on the bone as much as I can, but obviously we get on or off the bone, especially with lemon sole. So
Right.
what we do is we do like that on both sides, and then put the fillets together.
Now, interestingly, I have a lot of chefs coming into the seafood school, and a lot of them have never done this before. And I think that, you know, you end up with, it's probably quicker by the time you've taken that fillet off, and then you can decide what you're going to do with it. And you can see where my finger is now, where that fish has had, where it's the row's been sitting. So back over, once this possibly will get a little bit fatter, that roe, and that fillet will shrink. Say come sort of July time, that will be coming back into condition, I'd say, and the fillet will be filling out again. But absolutely glorious. And up to you whether you leave the skin on or take the skin off.
It's quite interesting actually, because I'm just looking at the chat, and
Just going to put back up again so I can see it.
Single mostly, and then there's Ken saying being taught the quarter cut method, and then Kenny Smart saying lemon sole is always double fillet, and Andy Cummins, a very good fish cook that I know, is he's doing both. So
Right.
fillets at the top and bottom double. So yeah, hi Roy, Edinburgh.
So yeah, say Kerry says you do both methods.
So it's interesting, isn't
Very
it?
good to do it. Certainly, when I was working, it was always the cross-cut fillet, and certainly when you're doing a turbot, that's going to be the best option. Okay, so with those two ready to go, what I'm going to do next is just look at a monkfish tail. Do you any other questions about that? I'm certainly just interested to know. And I'm going to bring a monkfish tail onto the board. It's not a flatfish, but it is a really important landing in Scotland, and I know that. Now these, do you use much monkfish?
Loads. I've actually got on the menu this week for our Ondine at home. So we're doing monkfish satay this week.
Lovely, lovely. Well, it's an interesting fish because really back in the 90s, it's only been really popular since about the 1960s. I have a lot of old fishmongers. When I mean old, they've been in the business for a very, very long time. And they all say to me that this fish would have gone into what they call a cat flat box. So a fishmonger would get it, it had no value, and they put it into the cat flat box. So as Mrs. Smith comes in and says, have you got anything for the cat? That's what they'd offer, along with things like pollock and coley in days gone by. And I don't know if you remember the old-fashioned cook. There was a first television chef, I think it was Fanny Craddock and her husband. And she said, oh, darlings, it's just like langoustine or Dublin Bay prawn. And then she let on, I think, that a few people were using this in place of Dublin Bay prawns, because obviously when it's cooked, it's deep fried, whatever, it's got a very firm texture. Anyway, it's now reached pinnacles of expense. Everybody loves it. And it's fantastic, obviously, for stir frying and your satay. In the same way that turbot is, if you've got a decent sized turbot, when you cut that, I've actually stir fried turbot before, and it holds together really nicely. I've done a number of different things. So it's, you know, like that. This is obviously a very versatile fish. Before I go any further, one of the things I was thinking about saying is washing hands. Now, I don't know what you say, but I have lots of chefs go, oh, I use lemon. But actually, when we wash our hands after we handle fish, we only ever use cold water and then hot soapy water. And then you don't need lemons. From a domestic perspective, lemons are 45p. So the cold water and hot soapy water afterwards seems to deal with the issue. And I don't know what you say.
Good point, CJ. Could you lift up your camera, my dear, just a little bit? Because, yeah, just a bit more. A bit more. A little bit more. Yeah. And
sorry, was it too far down? Okay.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Sorry. Typical, isn't it? The last day, and my lovely setup with two laptops, and one of them decides it's not going to be very good. Anyway, so going back to this monkfish, it's normally has the head removed for sale. So when it lands at Peterhead, and as I said, it's an important catch there, a processor will take the head off purely because of the weight of the head, and obviously the cheeks come out as well. The other thing that's really popular with monkfish is the liver. The Japanese use a lot of ankara, I think they call it, the liver, and they use it for sushi. Not occasionally see boxes of it at Billingsgate, and I'm not that enthusiastic about it actually. But anyway, so you got the head and the other thing with those teeth, like the hake we had the other day, there's several rows of very sharp teeth that sort of needs a bit of orthodontics. Those teeth head inside. I have an old fishmonger or a fisherman down on the south coast, and they used to have monkfish down on the south coast, and they called it kettlemar. And I no idea what kettlemar came from, and all the fishermen said, well, put the kettle on, Mar, and that's, I don't know. Anyway, so they have, there's lots of regional names for it. He had one of these on his boat once, and it bit into his boot, and he couldn't get the thing to open its mouth, so he took his boot off, managed to pull the monkfish off. The next time he put his boot back in, it had loads of holes in it, so they got really, really sharp teeth. So anyway, the heads are got rid of. When it's displayed, I'm rattling on now, when it's displayed, it's always displayed with the skin side down, so you can actually see the quality of the fish. So you go into a fishmonger, they would normally display it like this. So that would prevent the flesh coming into direct contact with ice, and also you can see the quality, and I'd expect this to be a lovely, almost blue white. It's so fresh. As it loses condition, it tends to go a little bit yellowy, and the smell's fine. It's good. It's another demersal fish, so swimming on the seabed, but you know, it's good to work with. Now, for cooking this, I had a friend yesterday who was cooking this on the barbecue, and she smoked it on a plank. So what she did was she took a damp, I think it might have been hickory plank, dampened it, put the whole fish on there. She took the skin off, but put the whole fish on it and cooked it on the bone. But it's one of those fish that needs several methods of skinning, and I'm going to just pull off my skin first of all. I'm getting my finger, using my fingers on there just to pull off the dark skin, releasing it. Now I can tell you, and please don't be offended by this, but I can tell you this is definitely a Scottish landed monkfish. Do you know why? Any ideas? No. Well, when they take the head off, in the two big landings for monkfish, one is Scotland and one's Cornwall. And when they land them in Cornwall, they take all of the belly off, so you never get any belly flap. So it's always very neatly trimmed. In Scotland, they always leave the belly on. So that's how I always know on the market where it's actually been landed. So this is Scottish, and I'm going to just pull that skin away using a cloth. And then down to the tail, skin a rabbit. And of course, it's known as a tail. As soon as you've taken off the head, it suddenly becomes a tail. Skin, you can't, the Jewish community wouldn't want to eat this because it doesn't have any scales. It's a scaleless fish. So you're not going to be affected by that. And then obviously you've got all these different layers of membrane over the fish. And the best way, I think, of dealing with this is to fill it first of all. So I'm going to put my knife at an angle, and I'm going to run in that knife just close to, again, I'll need that cloth, using a long sweep. Just open up the fillet by about 1 centimetre or so, and turning the knife so I actually can feel the knife on the bone. And then I'm going to turn the fish over and slip my knife straight through to the other side, holding onto the top, and then I'm going to allow the midsection of the blade to take the tail off. So it's known as breaking the tail. And then again, I'm just going to use a slice to take that fillet away. So there's virtually nothing on there. Same on the other side, knife in, using as long a cut as you possibly can, and at an angle, so you're not going to lose the flesh. It's gone deep enough that side, so break the tail, knife straight through, and just down to the tail. And when I'm working with a knife, the heel, where you've got most control, That's for breaking the bone. The midsection is where you've got probably the best control when you're actually trying to get the knife down a bone. And the tip is what I used a bit earlier when I was filleting or lifting the fillets on that witch. Tip of the knife down. So when I'm working with a knife, I look at it in 3 different areas. The midsection of the blade is going to be perfect for the skinning of this. And what I would do now is, instead of spending hours just peeling that away, I would use a deep skinning technique. So what I'm going to do is use the midsection of the blade, not making life terribly easy, because do you remember when I was skinning the first week, I was trying to keep my hands off the board so you can keep the knife flat. But I'm going to go in at the tail, and it's almost like you do lose a little bit of flesh, but it's a great way, by deep skinning, of actually taking that flesh away. So you're not having to, any bit of dark membrane on there, so it's going to go grey, tough around the fish. So using the midsection of the blade, I'm going to pull that away, and it might look wasteful. You've got bits and pieces for stock, you've got little bits to stir fry, but you end up with a really nice clean fillet with no little bits of membrane on it. It's a deep skinning technique. It's a technique that's used for lots of some of the exotic species we have in the market, things like coral trout. They've got a very, very oily texture close to the skin. But for monkfish, because you simply don't want that skin, you don't want anything on there, because if you see how tight it is, it's a bit grim. So what would you do with that? Would you use that technique, or would you just get somebody to put a knife down to lift the skin off? Because lots of people have different ways. It's just my method.
I think, I would be saying, like, yeah, when you're taking the skin off that way, by pushing down, but we're always serving our monkfish on the bone, and it's like a steak, like a tronchon, a little bit like what you did with the hake in the very first. And just by serving it on the bone, it just keeps that extra bit of moistness in it. And we're always just conscious of taking off the sinew lines, and also any cartilage, any loose cartilage from the monk bone.
We talked about this the other week when we were working with the hake as well. You do occasionally get worm in this. And commercially, they use a candling action where they would take a light box. And because it's known in monkfish, and certainly things like cod, they pass the skin fillet over that, so it would pick up any codworm that might be in the fish. And that's the issue with working with a demersal fish. So I wanted to talk about something just very quickly in a minute, because I'm going to be doing Sunday brunch this weekend with Simon Rimmer, and we're going to be looking at canned fish. And I'm really, really pro, and I'm sure Seafood Scotland don't mind me saying this, about the canners, the international fish canners based in Fraserburgh. They are the only canning business in the UK, and they've worked flat out over the last few months, doing all the mackerel and sardines that goes into all the major retailers. So as a big shout out for them, actually, because we haven't done anything with oily fish. We did the white fish, low-fat fish. We've done another group of the low-fat fish, but we haven't talked and done much to do with mackerel and that. And I'm on my trip to Peterhead, I was up in Fraserburgh actually having a look at that. So really worth it. I know that in a restaurant situation, you're probably not going to be using a canned fish, but certainly a lot of people are using it at the moment. I'm going to put everything back out again now, show you what I've done. So there's all my different bits of fish ready to go.
Well, actually, somebody's just asked a question. Maybe it's Anna. Maybe a 4th masterclass for oily fish.
Oh yes, well, we have to look at Seafood Scotland. I'm going to put my name across the brand there, but that is some of the packaging. I feel so excited about it. Everybody says fish is so expensive, and just on with a can of that. It's just such a great way of snacks and everything else. And some of the best mackerel is landed into Scotland. It's very high in oil. It's higher in oil up in Scotland than it is on the south coast. So it's brilliant for smoking, and they do a great job. So I really wanted to just, from a seafood perspective, really promote them. So make sure you go into Major Reel and pick them up. Yes, well done, Caroline. Tin mackerel is my go-to snack, absolutely. So anyway, I'm going to be promoting canned mackerel on Sunday.
I'm looking forward to it, actually. What dish are you going to do? Are you allowed to tell us, or are you not allowed to tell us?
Well, I'm not going to be doing dishes. They specifically asked me to look at canned fish, but I'm going to be talking about I'm going to be talking about the process and what's out there and what's available. You go into the major retailers, and I think people walk past the cans, but if you go into places like some of these really smart places, they've got row upon row of canned fish. So you've got the mackerel here and sardines. I do a lot of sardines, but there's a huge range. So I'm actually going to be opening up a few cans, and we'll see what they're going to be talking about. We've got quite some slightly more unusual things, I think. We've got some squid cooked in its own ink, which is also in a can. So, okay. So I'm just looking at what. Yes, looking at what Caroline's saying. So we've had. I haven't run out of things to say, but we've cut a lot of our fish this morning. So, are there any other questions?
Question. There you go. Monk cheeks are a suggestion. Yeah, monk cheeks. Monk cheeks are really good. We just do a crispy monk cheek. We fry it in we flour it up in a panko breadcrumbs and serve it with tartar sauce as a starter. So monk cheeks, yeah, I love them. Great.
Lovely.
What else have we got here? Hello from International Fish Canners. Thank you, CG. And the MPD team, we have enjoyed the masterclass. So well done, mate. You've done a bloody good job.
No, I just, can I just say, I have a 16-year-old and he says he never eats fish. He eats a huge amount of it, but he just doesn't realise it. And for the last 4 lunches, he's had mackerel tossed into a number of different things. And he compliments me on my cooking, and I'm thinking, yeah, well, it's not me. All I've done was open up a can. It's absolutely, and just tossed it into some cooked rice. So it's such a great go-to, and I'm really wanted because it's Scotland and it's promoting everything in Scotland. I thought I must mention them today. So
right. So what's
each of your favourite seafood? So what's your favourite seafood, Roy? What do you like?
Oh, that's a really good question. I have to say, whole turbot. Just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. When you cook it and all the gelatinous juices that come out, it's just, and as in a whole fish, not filling it, CG, just, whole, just trimmed up.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And the frills, because they're full of gelatinous proteins, and you just spread that onto your bread with some olive oil, cracking. Love it.
Beautiful. Well, I must say, I think brill is, if it was the last meal, I think brill would be my particular favourite. Quite like John Dory actually, but yes, so that would be my favourite. Halibut's very nice, but I think in order of preference, which pretty much at the top. And when people ask me what my favourite fish is, I normally say it depends who's paying. So if my dad's paying, we might be eating farmed caviar, but if there's anybody else, sorry, so yeah, grill I think for me would be the best thing, and I just like it poached. Do lots of poaching and steaming. I am married to somebody who's a northerner and he loves his fish and chips, but I try and get as much of this into our diets as possible. So,
and also
recommend one fish to get started with for a newcomer into filleting. Do you know? I think just thinking about that. Do you know one of the best things to fillet is a mackerel? Because if you're getting into filleting for the first time, it's not expensive. You can buy half a dozen, and if you make a mess, it doesn't matter. The most important thing when you're working with these knives, I'm going to tip this down again just to show you, is to get a real feel for the blade, your heel, your midsection, and the tip, using long sweeping actions, controlling your knife carefully. Always use a cloth to protect your hands. And with something like mackerel, I would fillet the mackerel by going in at the head and then turning the midsection of the body down and just gently cutting down, tilting the knife down to the tail. And just keep on doing that just to get the practice. And the bone structure is firm enough. Herring and trout have got too soft a bone structure, and sea bass and sea bream have got too hard a structure. I think mackerel, it would be my favourite. And actually, you cannot beat a really, really beautiful quality fresh mackerel. I'm just tipping you back up again. I'm so sorry about the cameras, wretchedly. But
just don't know when to speak today, but I was going to ask you, Jess Sparks. Can we bring Jess Sparks onto the panel now?
Oh, yes, please.
Hi, mate.
Hello.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm glad I've managed to connect. I was having awful problems to start with, so it's good that I've managed to follow you all through. Excellent session, CJ. Excellent session.
Well, no, thank you very much. As you know, I've absolutely loved it. It's quite nerve-wracking cutting in front of a whole lot of chefs, actually, particularly Scottish chefs, and I'm English, so. But it's been an absolute delight. Sorry.
And the Flatfish is apt because it's just really starting to come into season now. So as we go through the summer, you know, the Flatfish species that you've highlighted, particularly the lemon sole, the plaice, the whips, the megrim, they're all really going to come into a good plentiful supply between now and the end of the summer.
Now, funny enough, actually, I didn't mention the megrim. It's another left-handed fish. So out of the three, you got your plate, you got your turbot, you got your brill, which are closely related, and then you got the megrim, which is a left-handed fish. It looks very similar to a witch, but it tends to be bigger, slightly softer flesh, I think. But it's one that I'd really love to get people eating a bit more of.
Sure,
So,
highly valued in Spain, but as you say, very much underutilized here in the UK. But I mean, plaice is a great one. It's a relatively cheap flatfish, fully sustainable, MSC certified up in Scotland now, of course.
Yeah.
You know, and a really good, you know, and a widely abundant and widely available product to get your hands on.
Absolutely, as I said, such a popular thing, and I think it's a fish that actually really is best cooked on the bone, and it's inexpensive. So people who say they can't afford fish, you know, we all treat ourselves, and if you're a chef, you've got access to different things. But mackerel and plaice, you know, got Britain where it is, you know, and I think certainly where landed into Scotland, fantastic. So.
Well, we're certainly going to be looking forward to the visits forthcoming at some point later on this year, or maybe perhaps early next. We'll be looking forward to seeing you up in the northeast of Scotland again. Can't wait.
Can I ask something about the boats? How many boats are out at the moment? Because it's been a really rough time, you know, with
Yeah, it's been. I mean, obviously the whole COVID situation has been a huge disruption to the industry. In the early days of lockdown, it was really dire. There was a very small percentage of the fleet out. It's gradually starting to improve. So, you know, we've got probably, from a demersal point of view, there must be best part of 100 boats back out at sea now. So, you know, it's been a very steady but gradual improvement, I'm pleased to say. But, you know, no question, a long way to go before we get back to what we would call a normal sense of normality, so to speak. But, you know, markets slowly improving here in the UK. I think until we see, you know, wider opening on both in Europe and the UK of food service and the out-of-home consumption, you know, we're going to have to be careful as it grows. But it's showing positive signs.
What tonnage have you had in the last? Well, were you at the market today by any chance?
No, very much now with current social distancing rules, you know, the market is only for essential operatives only. So unless you are, you know, directly involved in the purchasing of fish and seafood, then you know, restrictions on the market are such that no visitors. So no, I've not been there, but in close contact with what's being landed. And this week, first week in June now, it's probably been the most plentiful week since probably end of February, beginning of March. So that's an encouraging sign, as I say.
Excellent. No, very good. So, and see, as you know, those big 50-kilo boxes, and we see it being sent down to Billingsgate in nice 10-kilo boxes, all processed very often. So, anyway, thank you very much for your support, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to join when the Peterhead visit goes ahead. I'm really hoping to be able to come up and do that. Perhaps we can persuade the market when it's allowed to do a bit of a cutting session up in their lovely kitchen up in Peterhead.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
Well, I know Jimmy Buchan would be really up for that, so I'm sure it'd be great.
Indeed, he will. I'm sure he will, and I'll look forward to seeing you up there as well.
Nice to see you, Jess. Thanks for that.
Good stuff.
Well, CJ, thanks a lot.
Oh no, this is going to be my last visit to see you, unless we can persuade Seafood Scotland at some stage further down the line to do a mackerel one. But we've talked a little bit about it today, and There's so many different things, so many different bits of cutting. But it's been fantastic, and it's been really fabulous to get such positive feedback from everybody who's taken part in this. It's very, it can be quite lonely in that sort of isolated feeling, but I've really enjoyed being part of this little group. So much appreciated. And thank you to Seafood Scotland for making that invitation. So
yeah, that goes for
I'm
me.
going to be up there as soon as I'm allowed. I'm going to be up there helping out. I'd like to come and do a couple of days with you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, listen, I'd just like to say thanks to everybody that's came on and asked all the questions. There's a lot of great chefs, a lot of great colleges, people in our industry, and that's what makes it special. They're coming together like this and just sharing knowledge. And CJ, you've just been immense. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Take care.